Welcome to Rucks Balls and Oval Balls. Yes, that's right, we're back as ever, ready to talk rugby, and we're here to kind of keep you up to speed with things that are going on in the world of rugby. And as ever, I am joined by
It's Rory. He's here. He's made it back.
Rory is here. Now, let's get straight into it, Rory. I know this isn't mundane. I know this isn't banter, but please fill in the listener on your weekend's activities.
Yeah, so I did my Jurassic Coast challenge over the weekend, listeners. 100 kilometres along the Jurassic Coast. And as it turns out, that is too far.
Yes.
It's a really, really long way over some really, really tough hills.
I'd call that a long drive, let alone a long walk. Yeah.
To be honest, even in a car, I think I'd have been tired at the end of it. But six of us did it, and we got some real fallen soldiers today. A lot of people with not a lot of skin left on their feet, quite a lot of pain in their legs. We've raised over $5,000, which is really, really good.
Claps.
Yeah, thank you everyone for their generosity. I shan't be doing another challenge for quite some time. That was quite enough for me for the time being.
So your charitable endeavours are done for now.
Yes, I'm as charitable for as long as I have skin on my feet. Okay. And now that's all gone, I am no longer charitable.
That's fair enough. In contrast, Rory, I've just had a lovely day at Fort Park riding roller coasters. So it's two very different lives we've led today.
Well, I'm just so glad you've taken some time for yourself, David. To, ride a whirly-girlies.
Yeah, some of us do selfless acts of charity. Some of us go get thrown around by machinery. Different strokes for different folks.
Yeah. Well, you've got to do what makes you happy, David. And I say that,
you don't seem very happy.
I will make it clear. Yeah, to be very clear, walking 100 kilometres along the coast does not make me happy. Yeah.
I should also make it very clear to the listener that I have strong-armed Rory into having today's podcast because he really, on his list of things he wanted to do today, recording a podcast rather than recovery wasn't top of the list. But
David, I'd have crawled my way back here from Dorset to speak to you again.
Ever the professional, ever the committed rugby ruck ball oval baller, Rory. We are very proud of what you've achieved, and hopefully you are going to get some lovely rest to rest those weary knees and feet and legs and back, and I imagine most limbs.
Yes, yeah. They're all sore.
It was also a really lovely weekend weather-wise. So as a man of a similar stature, I appreciate that was probably also not very good for you.
Yeah, it was hot.
It was a
warm one.
It was a warm one. But let's move on quickly. Let's move on quickly to this pod. We're going to do it slightly differently to accommodate the fact that Rory spent his weekend really suffering on the Jurassic Coast. We're going to go more into depth around a couple of things in the world of rugby and a slightly lighter touch than what maybe you're used to around Premiership Rugby. But we'll still be talking about it, don't worry. But we're going to start off with, well, not as ever, because we only started it last week, but kind of a little rugby news roundup, a couple of things that kind of jumped out to me through the week. And the first one that really jumped out to me, Rory, was the announcement around the rebranding and the restructuring of the Tier 2 competition coming to English rugby near you called Champ Rugby.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure I'd have named it after a hearty and delicious Irish dish of mashed potato and cabbage. But given the worries that we've had in recent weeks about what was going to happen with Tier 2 and whether the RFU were prepared to just let it fall by the wayside, I'm really, really pleased that something's been done to relaunch it. And the news, it's exciting, I think. I think they're close to creating a situation where the Championship becomes a proper going concern and a competitive league that can feed into the Premiership. I'm really pleased.
Yeah, I'm all for it. And as we've said on this podcast before, just look across the channel and look at what's going on in France. And with Champ Rugby anyway, they are basically mirroring the Pro 2 and kind of taking some of those concepts and really trying to kind of take that, and they've openly said that they're using that as a model to replicate. So again, you're very welcome, RFU, for us generating ideas for you on your behalf. We're here to kind of help. I think there's a lot of things with this that I'm really quite excited about. I like the idea that there's potential for 2 National League clubs to come up for a relegation playoff system. And I also like the idea of the 16 playoff at the top of the table. It feels like a bit more of an event. Promotion relegation in practice is still on the cards, although that doesn't quite go hand in hand with this franchise talk we've heard.
Yeah. I mean, my reading of it is, I think they're still trying to get to a point where they can have a 12-team Premiership.
Yeah,
I think that's still the long-term goal there.
Yeah.
Probably still realistically looking for Irish and Wasps to fill the final 2 slots between the 2 leagues to bulk it out a little bit. So whether there's still going to be a genuine relegation battle with the National 1 teams eventually, who knows? We'll see. That's kind of a bit... I think long term, that's probably a bit more up in the air than they want to admit at the moment. But they're still trying to at least create the framework for a proper pyramid. But I think it's in general, it's really positive news. They've got what looks like some good branding. They've already started producing lots of new content. You know, it looks to me like an actually genuinely well thought through idea. So. You know, remains to be seen whether that pathway between the Championship and the Premiership does open up a little bit. Maybe that's still a little bit TBC.
Yeah.
But in terms of intent, I think it's a really good first step.
Yeah, and I do like the footing they're setting out on of it being kind of proving ground for players to then prove that they're capable of playing in the Premiership. And there's a whole load of squad rules about, I think it was like having 18 English qualified players in a matchday squad. I think it was like no more than, I think they're allowed up to 6 dual registered players in a matchday squad as well with different Premiership clubs. So there's a few tweaks to those rules as well, which kind of make it interesting. So there's a bit of an emphasis on developing your own players still, but still retaining those links with kind of Premiership sides and kind of having those opportunities for the younger players. All I'm really wanting to see now, and I don't think we're going to get it sadly, would be a TV deal announced to show a game of Champ Rugby each round.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's probably not enough money in it for a TV company to do it. Probably what you will get beforehand is either the RFU or Championship Rugby showing games on a YouTube channel or something. I would imagine that's probably more realistic to start with.
That's probably more likely.
But maybe they'll be able to get the playoffs towards the end of the season televised. There might be enough interest there to generate that.
Yeah.
Obviously, we talked about the TV deal last week with TNT. There's no real talk about within that framework whether the Championship is at all considered. But you'd think with that kind of outlay, TNT might be sniffing around to see what extra value they can get from the contract. So
definitely. And I was talking about this with someone on TikTok, on a TikTok live, about imagine the prospect where they did a double header where it was the Champ final on the same day as a Premiership final on the same day.
Yeah.
And like I threw out the idea of, why not throw PWR in there as well? Like make it a real finals weekend feel. Like there's potential and things there. There's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just in general, it's just good to see some
innovation.
Innovation in terms of the marketing, the branding, just trying to get things a little bit more up to scratch, a little bit more contemporary. It's long overdue, but it seems like they're starting to get their act together on some of these things. Yeah.
On the topic of Champ Rugby, have you also seen? So the latest in the news is the gradual, slow release of the new Worcester squad and the squad they're building. I don't know if you've had a chance to see some of the players they've picked up, but I've been quite impressed with what we've seen so far.
Yeah, so I've seen Matt Kovacic, who's a player I'm very fond of from his Gloucester days.
Yeah.
Josh Bassett, I think, has gone there, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's gone there.
And Lloyd Williams.
Lloyd Williams was announced at time of filming. We're recording on a Monday, slightly out of kilter that we'd normally reveal our recording secrets, but yes, so that Lloyd Williams was there, and then it was Tim Anstey the day before. Let me just check to make sure I've not missed any. And Tiff Eden as well.
Yes.
So some names that are quite familiar with anyone that's kind of followed Premiership Rugby for a while. it looks like they're building quite a good squad. So it's going to be interesting next year where they settle in Champ Rugby. Especially coming up against the likes of Ealing, Doncaster, Bedford, who have all been pretty competitive this year.
Yeah, I've seen Coventry making some good moves as well. They've just signed the Doncaster number 8. The name's just gone out of
Morgan
my head.
Strong.
Morgan Strong, that's it.
Yeah.
Welsh lad who's very highly rated. Coventry, I think, have got some ambitions as well, which is good to see because they're a very famous old club, but they've obviously been out of kilter for some time, really struggled in professionalism. So if you can get to the point where you've got Worcester, Ealing, Doncaster, Coventry, Bedford in the short term all in the mix for pushing at the top of the league, then, arguably you've got the makings of a strong group of teams to push for promotion.
Yeah, and also not necessarily on our list of things to chat about, Rory, but I've been really, really impressed and excited about what Coventry are doing around their academy stuff, their draft days. It's really clever, really smart. I really like it. I think more clubs should be looking at that.
Yeah, they did the combine, didn't they? Which is something we spoke about as a potential idea for Newcastle. And I know Bristol have done a similar thing as well, but I'm not sure they actually signed anyone. But Coventry's signed was a hooker, I think.
Yeah.
Who'd been playing in National 1, I think, National 2. I think those are the kind of innovations that those teams need because there's definitely players in the lower league that could, thrive at championship level as it is now. And then you're just opening up narratives that you can build upon from a marketing perspective. So, yeah, I mean, I think maybe the right people are getting interested in it and starting to make an impact on strategies that's actually,
more like that, please, is what I say.
Absolutely,
big fans of that. And then to round off. A little rugby roundup for people. I know there's more rugby news out there for people, but of interest to Premiership rugby fans. Thoughts on Dave Walder coming in to Exeter Chiefs as their backs and attack coach, now that they've formally let go of Ali Heifer and Rob Hunter? Yeah,
I mean, Dave Walder's been around for a long time as a coach, and obviously a very good career himself. I think it's a good sign-in. My read on it is that Exeter are going to be very much once again under Baxter's direction from a coaching perspective. I think he's very much taken over day-to-day coaching, and will be for the foreseeable. The noise is coming from Tony Rowe and Baxter with that they want him very much involved day-to-day with the players. But Dave Waters, I think, is a really good addition to that. He's just a well-regarded skills and attack coach.
Yeah,
and given where some of Exeter's frailties have been this season with the ball, I think it's a really good.
Could be what they need.
Addition for them.
Some new ideas. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But for now, that'll be our nice little aperitif of rugby news, because we're going to go into something slightly meatier, Rory. Now, I appreciate to the listener that you're probably listening to this later in the week than we are talking about this, and that I am very aware that on Tuesday there is an English practice squad being announced for the summer tour. So this is going to be a practice squad, and it's not going to include players from the Lions. It's not going to include players from Bath or Northampton, so to allow them to focus on their European finals. So this is very aware that we're going to have this session post that being released, prior to us seeing those names. We're also actually going to have a go at shots at putting together our England summer squad. So this isn't our practice squad for the France 15 game. This isn't like the England 8. This is the squad we would like to put together to go out to USA and Argentina and take those on in the summer tour whilst the Lions are away doing their thing in Australia. And I think it's a really exciting time to have this discussion, because I love talking England rugby. I love talking the future of England rugby. And this is the two things coming together. So we've had a go at putting together some squads. So we'll kind of do like we did with Lions. We'll go through our squads, and then we'll kind of settle on a maybe starting 15 and bench. I think we've both picked a 36-man squad.
Yes. And the way I've looked at this was, I think the temptation is a very English rugby fan temptation is to just pick all the youngest players and see who the next caliber thing is, which doesn't really take into account how young the England squad already is.
Yeah.
And with the world rankings and the pool selection for the next World Cup coming up later this year, it's actually reasonably important for England to go out and hopefully get a couple of results against Argentina.
Yeah.
because they're behind them in the rankings at the moment, and they could really do with overtaking them. So it's not a tour for.
It's not a development tour.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, exactly. It has to be one that they've got to go out with the mindset of winning.
Yes.
So
before going into these squads, I will say that I've had to rein myself in a fair bit on some of my picks and probably go more practical than I would have liked to have gone.
Yeah.
For that exact reason, Rory, because I agree. It is probably a more important tour than people realise when you do take into account the Rugby World Cup rankings. It is going to be coming to that time of the year where those group stages are drawn and your rankings are very important.
So, I mean, that being said, I think there's plenty of room within this to take a punt on a few players, and I think there's a chance to do things a little bit differently, but balancing that with having enough nous and experience in there to get some results.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how our squads are fared up, I'd say. So let's start where we always start, at the best, at the top, at the creme de la creme, at the props.
Let's do it.
I have got 6 named.
Me as well. So obviously Will Stewart and Ellis Genge are on the Lions tour, so that does open things up a little bit.
Yeah.
So on the loose head side, I've got Finn Baxter.
Yep.
Obviously, Ellis Genge is understudy at the moment, and I think will probably be the starting loose head this summer.
Yep.
Bevan Rodd, who's very much been in and around the squads recently and has had a really good season for Sales, come on leaps and bounds as a scrummager and an all-round player.
Yeah.
And I've gone for Eogan.
Okay. Yeah. I don't hate that pick.
I think he's really developed into a very good loose head. I think there's still questions about scrummaging. We'll talk about it a bit later. Struggled a little bit in the game this weekend. But possibly in that kind of environment, he might be able to step up and really develop that scrummaging to a top level. And I think from a raw capabilities perspective, he looks a player to me that's got every chance of developing into a very, very good prop. So, did you have any different picks on loose heads?
So I do, and it's only because of how England have treated Ashra Poku-Fajor through the under-20s. So I've picked a Poku-Fajor to be a loose head, but to also kind of be a floating tight head as well. So I've also got Beno Abano in there. So I've kind of picked 4 loose heads.
Yeah. But Beno Abano's not a bad pick at all. I think maybe it's a bit late now for Beno Abano to break into the England squad.
This is what I mean.
It's
not about breaking in. I just think he'll do a solid job.
No, look, he's a really good player, Beno Abano. He's probably been a bit unfortunate with injuries and suspensions at the wrong time in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
The only reason I didn't pick him was I think at the moment I think Baxter and Rod are ahead of him in terms of the established props.
Yeah.
And I think if you're going to pick a couple of established props and someone to take on tour to kind of assess them and see if they're ready to step up, I think for me, it's a Eogan rather than a Abano.
I'm happy with that. So tight head wise, so I got a Poku-Fajor, as I said. I got Fassabon and Trevor Davison.
So I've got Joe Hayes rather than Trevor Davison.
Okay.
Trevor Davison is a really good player, but I don't think his scrummaging is quite strong enough to make it at the top level. And I think Joe Hayes proved in the Six Nations that actually his scrummaging is strong enough to cope at international level. And he's had a very good season for Leicester, really stepped up in sort of finally breaking out from Dan Cole's shadow. For my money, I suspect he'll be the starting tight head actually this summer, with probably a Poku-Fajor on the bench, and for Sogburn
developing,
hopefully getting a shot, but probably still the development player. I think with Afo, at the moment, his scrummaging is really, really strong. His defence is generally strong, with the odd kind of lapse. Where I think his development is different to Poku-Fajor's in terms of that step up into the men's rugby is, at the moment, he's still, I think, not quite able to bring his carrying game into the men's game consistently. He has the odd moment, but where that was one of his real strong points in the under-20s, I think he's not quite imposing himself as a ball carrier at the moment, and I suspect he will be tested in that area in that England squad as something to develop. So for me, it would be Joe Hayes will start, but Poku-Fajor will be on the bench, and for Sogburn will be there to develop in that environment.
Yeah. Well, I think my only concern is when you look at that stable of props, they're all similar moulds of quite athletic, dynamic props. I think the only reason I went Davison is that he offers your more old school anchor, beefy prop that is absent. Because I don't think Hayes is a massive prop. I don't think, so Bevan Rod's quite athletic, Apoku Fijor's athletic, Yogan, Baxter, they're all athletic. Fasabon's a unit, but as you say, he's very raw, where Davison is a kind of rugged, seasoned, more classic tight head prop. That's the only reason I went for Davison.
Yeah, he's a fun player, and he proved with Northampton against Leinster that his scrummaging can hold up. Something nags in the back of my mind though on that one. I think Joe Hayes.
I think Joe Hayes is probably ahead of him in the pecking order, so he probably would get selected ahead of him. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think Joe Hayes has probably shown himself to be a more than capable enough scrummager.
Okay.
At that level.
Happy with that. Okay. Hookers.
So I'm taking Jamie George.
Yeah.
Possibly as squad captain. He's between two players for me for squad captain.
Yeah.
Taking Theo Dan.
Yeah.
And then it was a bit of a toss-up for the third slot for me between Ogre and Langdon.
Same.
And
you can tell where I landed.
Yeah, I know exactly where you'll have landed. I did land on Ogre, basically because he's been in and around the England squads more than Langdon. I think they do see something there, and I do think this season he has come on leaps and bounds in terms of the nuts and bolts of his gameplay. He's always been that very attacking, dynamic player. I think his nuts and bolts around the line out, the scrum, your defence, hitting, attacking rucks, defensive rucks. I think his all-round gameplay's come on leaps and bounds. Langdon, though, would be a perfectly good choice, but I just wonder the value of taking Langdon in. Think there's a chance if you're the third hooker there, you might not get played. My gut feel is that Jamie George and Theo Dan will take the bulk of the minutes over this tour.
Yeah. Well, it's true. And maybe it does work more in Ogre's favour that, Langdon won't be available for this practice squad meetup because he's in a final. Ogre will be. And Ogre has definitely locked down the 2 shirt at Bristol ahead of Thacker. So he's definitely had a great season. So he definitely deserves a call-up. But I do love Curtis Langdon. He is so good.
So, look, I mean, you've been very magnanimous with my prop choice, so I'm happy to take Langdon over Ogre on that basis.
Yes, my tactic worked. Langdon is in. Okay, locks. I've got 4 locks.
I've got 4 locks.
Okay.
So I've got Alex Coles.
Yep.
I've got Lockett, whose first name I can never remember.
Tom Lockett. Okay. Yep.
Tom Lockett, Arthur Clarke.
Yep.
And Nick Ezekwe.
Okay. So I've got Coles, Ezekwe, and Arthur Clarke, and this is where I've had to hold myself a little bit back from picking players that probably aren't going to go. There was a lot of players that I would have loved to have picked, Lockett being one of them.
Yeah.
And there's a few others that were kind of close to being inked down on my list, but I went with Charlie Ewells because I think we might need a bit of grunt, a bit of edge in the engine room against Argentina.
Yeah, Charlie Ewells, I probably rate him higher than a lot of people do who take some very snap decisions on him based on some of his previous performances for England. He's been really good for Bath this season, and he is massive. He bangs in defence. Mm-hmm. He's got a very underrated all-round skill set. But I do wonder if the red cards for England will
haunt him forever.
Put paid his chance. Yeah. And I think Lockett is developing into a similar-ish player. He looks like a big tight head lock to me.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's definitely developing into a similar sort of player. I just wonder whether this is the time for Lockett or whether it's a bit early. Because he's only emerged this season. He has had a great season. He's really like if there wasn't a certain Henry Pollock around, Tom Lockett would 100% be in the discussion. Yeah. Certainly from a Northampton perspective of being like breakthrough player for sure.
Yeah. I'm just a big fan of his. I think he's got a really good all-round skill set. He's so mobile for his size, and the fact that he is in that kind of tight headlock mould, quite old school English style tight headlock rather than kind of the new French style. Which we just don't have the players.
I'm not going to argue a Bath player to be ahead of a Northampton player.
So we take Lockett?
We're taking Lockett. And remember, this was your pick, not mine. Okay, back row. I've got 7 names written down here.
I've got 7 names written down. So
okay.
I
think the obvious one here is... So the obvious one for me is Ted Hill because he covers second row as well.
Yes, Ted Hill's in my list.
Okay.
So I got Ted Hill, Chandler Cunningham South.
Okay, yeah.
Kenningham.
Yeah.
Tom Willis,
Yeah.
Guy Pepper,
Yeah.
Ben Curry,
Yeah.
and Alfie Barbary.
Interesting. So I have the exact same picks, bar Cunningham South.
You're not picking Cunningham South?
I partly forgot about him, if I'm honest. Much like most of the Quins team, been quite forgettable in the back end of the season, I'd say.
I would say he's probably been a bit of a shining light, if not, but only in sort of relative terms. But I also think he covers second rows 6 and 8, so a handy players in the squad.
But before you doubt my pick, Sam Underhill.
So Sam Underhill was definitely a player I thought about picking because he's brilliant and he's always brilliant. And the rule should be if Underhill's fit, you pick Underhill. Yeah. That should always be the rule.
Yeah.
Partly, I still sort of think, is he likely to be fit by the time of the summer tour? Because fortunately, you just can't guarantee it with him.
He played this weekend.
He did play this weekend. And then part of me wonders, and this is just sort of maybe me overthinking it a little bit, but I wonder whether he's going to still be playing in England next season.
Interesting.
He didn't get the central contract.
Bath haven't released their leavers yet, to be honest. So
no. He didn't get the central contract. He hasn't got back into the England squad. I just wonder whether there's maybe a bit of falling out.
I'm just wondering, does this squad, the way I've got it written down, more need a Sam Underhill, assuming he is fit and is staying in England, or more need a Cunningham South, based on the other players available?
I think you probably need a Cunningham South. I would say I would be more inclined to swap Underhill in for Kenningham or Guy Pepper than I would for Cunningham South.
I'm happy to agree to a trade.
Should we say Kenningham?
Yes, let's say Kenningham, because Cunningham South covers the 6 shirt as well as other. So
we've got Underhill in for Jack Kenningham, which is harsh because Kenningham's had a very good season.
Very good season.
Guy Pepper, something about that guy, you just think he might end up being the best player in the world.
Henry Pollock, second best player.
Sorry, second best player, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been banging the Guy Pepper drum like when he was making his debut for Newcastle. So I'm a big fan of Guy Pepper. I'd love to see him in the England shirt. I think he is very underrated considering how promising he is.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm watching the Bath game back, and his involvements are just ridiculous. He's a machine.
Yeah,
he's an absolute machine. I think he's got. I mean, Johan van Graan was talking about him in the mould of like a Richie McCaw, which is a massive statement, and you don't want to put that kind of pressure on a young kid's shoulders.
No.
To live up to that kind of level, but you can kind of see where he's getting at with just the engine on him and the physical strength, and
his work at the breakdown is nuggety. It's
work at the breakdown. Yeah. He's a line-out option. He's got a really good attacking skill set as well. There's not a lot of weaknesses to his game.
No, I don't think there are any weaknesses. I think his biggest weakness is the fact he's at Bath and doesn't get game time every week. And so most people would say that's a strength. But I'd just love to see him play week in, week out. But with that Bath squad, he is behind Underhill. So, it's a tough one. But okay, that's the pack. I'm quite happy with that. Scrum half.
So I've got 3. This is probably my Roger choice here.
Okay, yeah, I've got 3.
So I've got Jack Van Portfleet.
Yep.
I've got Rafi Quirk.
Interesting.
And I'm taking whichever of the Bracken boys is the plays 9 for Saracens. Is it Charlie Bracken?
You're taking Charlie Bracken. Interesting.
I think Charlie Bracken has got a serious ceiling on him.
Okay.
He's like, he's my pick to be like, that guy's potentially going all the way to the top. Rafi Quirk I think has still got that ceiling in him as well, and actually watching him back
this weekend, very effective.
Looks like he's getting back to his best, right? After some real injury problems, but looks like he's sort of returning to that form. And then Jack Van Portfleet's just so good. Good for Leicester.
Yeah, so Jack Van Portfleet was probably my first name in my list. So I think I went more steady Eddie with my scrum half pick. So I went Ben Spencer and Will Porter.
Yeah, so Ben Spencer, I just think
I wasn't thinking about having a player that's there to develop for the future. I just wanted another steady head there.
No, no one would have to convince me of how good Ben Spencer is. There just seems to be some sort of dislocation between him and the England squad. Yeah. So it's just something doesn't quite click there. The fact that he just doesn't get the shots, which is why I didn't pick him. Will Porter, Will Porter, I would have picked if Marcus Smith was going on this tour rather than the Lions.
Okay.
Because I think Will Porter gets the best out of Marcus Smith. They dovetail really well. And I think Will Porter's as an all-round scrum half was a really good option.
Yeah.
But probably doesn't have any of like the super strengths that the other players do. He doesn't have that physical impact of Jack Van Porfleet. He doesn't have that speed of Rafi Quirk or Bracken.
Well, if I'm honest, I was umming and ahhing between him and Rafi Quirk, so I'm happy to go Rafi Quirk for Will Porter.
Yeah.
Then it's a question of whether we go with Steady Eddie or potential Bracken. I think when you're going scrum halves, you're taking 3. You can take 1 to get the experience, can't you? I'm sorry, Ben, but we're taking the kid.
Even in this weary state, I'm debating this into exactly what I want.
Plus, I like a wonder kid. I like a future superstar better than anyone. So who am I to stand in the way?
Absolutely. And I just think his ceiling to me looks so high.
And
every time I've watched him, I think there's just something special about him.
There's some pretty decent English scrum halves coming through. Lucas Friday's another one. He had a bad injury this year. I think he's got an incredibly high ceiling.
I'm really hoping he's back for the start of next season because I'd love to see him play a bit more in the Premiership.
Yeah, I think he may be one of the reasons why we've not seen Quinn's recruiter. Well, unofficially, we haven't officially had them announce Stuart Townsend yet.
No, it's assumed that he's going there, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think he might get some game time next year. It'll be interesting to see how he goes. But yeah, let's go JVP, Rafi Quirk and Charlie Bracken. Fly half, I've only picked 2 here, and that's purely because I just don't think a third warranted a selection.
I have picked 3, but one of them is a bit of a hybrid.
Okay. Well, one of them, I think one of them is going to be pretty obvious.
It's George Ford.
Yeah.
And I've actually, I landed on making George Ford my squad captain.
I am absolutely fine with that.
He's honestly, form he's in since Christmas. He's one of the form players in the Northern Hemisphere.
There'd be a strong argument for him starting this team if Finn Smith and Marcus Smith were still going with the England squad, the way he's playing at the moment.
Yeah,
so,
you genuinely wouldn't be able to argue it, I think.
No.
I think he's been as good as both of them, if not better. Yeah. I think he's certainly playing better than Marcus Smith, and he's arguably playing as well, if not better than Finn Smith. And Finn Smith's playing really well.
Yeah, over the last month, I cannot disagree with you. He's been unreal.
Yeah. Behind him, I've got Charlie Atkinson.
Yeah, I've picked him just based purely as I looked at a list of all the other English 10s who've played in the Premiership, and he's the only other one that's really a genuine option at this point, I think. Yeah.
I mean, he's been in a couple of the A team squads, played really well for the A team. He's a player with a really good skill set, reasonably high ceiling. He's quite versatile as well, played 10, 12, 15.
Yeah.
His defence has come on really well this season. Put some real shots in. He's got a good running game. If I was being brutal about it, the chance of Charlie Atkinson making it as a top international 10 are pretty slim, probably.
Yeah. Unless
something really changes. But he's a good Premiership level 10, and as you said, there's not actually a massive amount of those at the moment. Once you take Finn Smith and Marcus Smith out of the equation.
So who's your rogue third choice?
I made space for Kieran Donahue.
You've got him in
as obviously a 10 fullback kind of option. Partly it was just kind of to do with that thing of there aren't that many options around, and he's obviously only really been playing in the Premiership for the last few weeks.
Yeah.
So when I picked him, I realised it was it looks very much like a hype train, but I don't mind a hype train. Quite happy to jump on one.
All aboard the hype train.
I think he was really good at fullback for Bath this weekend.
He hasn't put a foot wrong, has he?
No. Basically, every time I've watched him, I've gone, there's not a lot that's not right about this guy. So it might be that he's sort of filling the squad to a certain extent, filling in some gaps. But as you say, there's not a lot of 10 options, and he might be one they want to have in around the squad just in case they need to slot someone in there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we'll decide when we have. I've gone 5 centres and 6 back threes.
Yeah, I've got 4 centres, 6 back threes.
Okay, so it's a case of whether we want to. So this is where I've just got. I want to pick. There's players I just want to see in an England shirt. So I'm guessing this is where we'll cut one to make room for Donahue. We're going to. But so my centres: Fraser Dingwall, Seb Atkinson, Oscar Beard,
okay,
Joe Woodward, and Ben Waghorn.
Interesting. So I went Seb Atkinson, Fraser Dingwall, Max Ajomo, and Marcy White.
Oh, we got some decisions to make here.
We've got some decisions to make here. Well, I'll give you my logic.
Yeah. So I only didn't pick a Jomo because I just fitness wise, I know he came off I kind of came off the bench this weekend. I'm just wondering whether he's fit. I don't know.
Part of me wonders with the Jomo whether long term him and Ollie Lawrence could make a really good centre partnership for England. His just all round skill set is just so impressive. Can play a bit of 10, can play 12, can play 13. Plays the game with a smile on his face.
Yeah,
reads the game really well. Every time I watch him, I just think he's just a really impressive young player. And I want to see him get a shot at international because I just think there's an international player in there.
Okay.
Marcy White.
Yeah, I nearly picked him. Like the thing is, if I could pick 6 centres, like I'm already pushing it with 5. I think he would have been my 6th.
Yeah, well, he just looks like a proper 12. So he scored a proper 12 try for Sale.
Yeah, that's the
really
issue.
physical.
I picked 3 12s, and I was like, how am I running out of 12s?
Yeah, I mean, for the standout 12 this season, English 12 this season has been Seb Atkinson.
Correct for me, absolutely.
So he's got to go.
Yeah.
Fraser Dingwall's got to go because he was very good for England. Ties that whole back line together. I'm not taking Henry Slade on the basis that
I don't think his form deserves it.
No, and I want to see what an England partnership looks like without Henry Slade, if I'm honest.
Well, without spoiling anything, my centre selection is based purely because I want to see Seb Atkinson and Fraser Dingwall playing together.
Yeah, well, I think that will probably, for me, that's the starting partnership.
That's what I want to see, and that's where I based my rest of selections on, because I think Oscar Beard is similar-ish to Dingwall, club differences, and I think Woodward and Waghorn are like where Seb Atkinson was like a year or two ago.
Yeah,
but Massey White is in that equation as well, so I'm happy to swap either of those out for Massey White.
I think it might be a bit early for Ben Waghorn.
Okay.
I think he's a really good player, but he's
not too early for Donahue, though, right? Yeah.
Arguably too early for Donahue.
Arguably.
But, yeah, arguably. The problem is, because Quins have been generally not very good this season, I'm finding it
hard to pick 2 Quinn centres when they've been quite leaky.
Yeah. I mean, Oscar Beers, I think, is a really good player at his best, but let's be realistic. They've not been great this season.
No. Okay, how about I'll give you Massey White and a Jomo on the basis that we don't take Donahue as a third fly half and we take a 5th centre out of one of Beard, Woodward or Waghorn. And I'd probably go
Fair
Beard.
enough. You want to go Beard?
I think he's more versatile, because he can play 12, 13 and a bit of wing.
Fair enough. Can't say fairer than that. I agree.
There we go. And I'll be honest, I kind of forgot about a Jomo because for some reason I thought he was still injured. Back 3.
Yeah, I struggled here because...
I'll throw a spanner in the works if I said Donahue, wouldn't it?
Yeah. This was quite a tough one because actually what I probably wanted was more back 3 options to select, but I didn't want to ever do it because I've ended up picking 3 fullbacks and 3 wingers, which doesn't feel like a good balance, but that's what I've ended up with.
I've got 4-2, 4 and 2.
Yeah, well, I've got George Furbank.
I haven't got him. I've assumed he's out for the summer.
Oh, is that assumed now, is it?
I think if he was going to be fit enough for the England tour, he would have been fit enough to play in the final, and if he was fit enough to play in the final, he would have got some minutes in the last weekend.
Okay, right.
So I'm kind of assuming that they've just they're just going to give him the summer to recover fully. That's my thinking.
Fine. Well, in that case, that might make it an easy swap out. But I'll give you the rest of my selections. So I've got Freddie Stewart.
Yeah.
Joe Carpenter.
Yeah.
Caden Murley.
Yeah.
Paul Brown-Bampo.
Of course.
To Collins.
Okay. So, the only difference is I had Roebuck in rather than Furbank.
Yeah, fine.
Easy peasy. Okay. So I put together what I'd like my starting 15 to be. There's already one issue. In that my front row, I had Davison starting for that rock, but I'm happy to trade out. I'm just going to quickly edit that, so it's going to be Hayes. So I've got my front row of Baxter, George, and Hayes. I've gone Coles and a Sequay in the second row.
Yeah.
Ben Curry, Sam Underhill, Tom Willis, back row.
You're probably losing out on a line-out option there, but it's not necessarily. I think Ben Curry could probably jump.
Tom Willis jumps as well. He's using the line-out.
Okay. Okay.
Van Portfleet and Ford,
Yeah.
Atkinson, Dingwall, Roebuck,
Yeah.
Carpenter, Murley.
Yeah, I'd be pretty happy with that. My only contention would be I want to start Ted Hill. I want to get Ted Hill.
Hey, if you want to swap Ben Curry with Ted Hill, I'm fine with it.
That's maybe my only contention because literally because you get that lineup option, but also
I also think
I just want to see that guy get a start.
And Ted Hill is in like the talking pot for like Player of the Year for the Premiership and stuff. So it's not like it's not warranted. Like
do you see him catch Radwan?
He's unreal. He's an absolute machine.
Yeah, he's a freak. I love it. And
like the fact for Bath's future, they've got Ted Hill and Guy Pepper, who are two absolute freaks of nature, like athletically. When they don't want to play Underhill and I don't know who else they're going to play in that back row, but the fact they got Ted Hill and Guy Pepper, that's it. They just feel like specimens of like supernatural abilities.
Yeah,
it's unfair. All I'm saying, again, sorry, Bath fans. I know you feel like we've targeted you before, but it's not fair that you've got all these players, especially when they're as good as Ted Hill and Guy Pepper. It's not fair, okay? We haven't even talked about Miles Reed, a chronically underrated player who's actually really good, never gets in the sniff of these conversations. But I'm not going to talk about Bath much more than I already have. But it's not fair. Okay, got that off my chest, Rory. Okay, it'll be interesting to see what the squad looks like announced tomorrow for us as we record. Because I think we will see some of the fringe players that we've probably spoken about being in the practice squad. Because obviously they can't pick all the players they'd want to. But it'll give us a good indication of probably where Borthwick is thinking. And it'll be really interesting to see if any of these fringe players do get good nods. I think the centres is the area that I'm particularly keen to find out where we're looking. Because I think over this last 12 months, I think that's the position where the talent pool for England rugby to select from has grown exponentially over the last 12 months.
Centres and props, but yeah.
Well, yeah, so props I'd say over the last 2 years, but I think over the last 12 months specifically, like this time last year, I wasn't sure about Ben Waghorn or Joe Woodward. Massey White had been forgotten about. Ajomo was kind of the forgotten man in kind of rugby. All of these players are putting their hands up now.
It's been a very good season to be an English centre in the Premiership, actually, hasn't it? If you think about it. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And actually to see the kind of talent that we haven't even talked about.
Yeah.
In the sense, the likes of Lee Hartley, who I think is going to develop into a really, really good player.
Another really, really good player. I think he's just suffered by the fact he's had injuries so frequently this season. Yeah. Tom Litchfield at Northampton's having a really quietly good season.
James Williams at Bristol's been a really good glue player for them.
Yeah. So like, there's more than just what you think. And
Will Butt would have been a perfectly good shout for this.
Yeah, the more you think about it, the more options there are available. Like, I would not be surprised to see Will Butt in the squad.
No. The more I think about it, the more I think we haven't got it right.
And that would be... It's good for us to be consistently incorrect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, very keen to see how this develops. We will be keeping a very close eye on this England touring squad. We will be following it just as much as we're following the Lions, people. Don't you worry. There's quite a bit of rugby going on, even when the Premiership finishes. But I said... the P word, the Premiership, Rory. Let's do a nice little summary of how that went. We'll just run through it game by game. We probably won't go into the same level of detail we have done in the past, just to kind of account for the fact we've just done a nice old chat around England. But the run-in, very much close to the end. Some interesting results here, some stories really unfolding. Let's start off Friday night. Sale up against Bristol, I believe.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that game from your ability to catch up after your marathon walk?
Sale I know they had a bit of a slip up last week, but Sale to me still looked like the team with enough variety in the way they played to really challenge for the title this year. Mm-hmm. The way I think it was the first try for Dan Dupree, where it goes wide, Ben Curry makes the break, and it's just a very simple draw and pass. Shouldn't be a remarkable thing, but it's very emblematic of the way that Sale play at the moment, where they just do the simple things very well, and it means that they can then let someone like George Ford do special things, and win them games. I still think they're the closest challengers to Bath for me.
I think the way George Ford's playing at the moment,
He could win the title off his own back at the way he's playing at this point.
He genuinely could. And the pack continues to impress me. They are beefy, they're meaty, they're very upfront, they're very confrontational. Like, you just have to look at the Dupria twins. They're so. They must be an absolute nightmare to play against. And when you've got the likes of Curry running around being an absolute pest, you've got Ben Bamber and Johnny Hill in the second row. Like, they're just meaty units. And you've got the likes of Ashra Poku-Fajor dancing around you at, 19, 20 stone. It's not fair.
That's the thing. But much like the Bath pack, they are big, meaty players, but with this like really underrated skill set.
Yeah,
they can all play. They can all properly play.
Yeah.
Just having that ability to switch between a power game and an offloading game and a running game.
Yeah,
just makes you such a threat to play against. And I think that's why they can maybe go toe to toe with Bath, because they can play all those different ways, and actually, they're probably the team that can pose the most different problems. Yeah,
no, I agree. It would be interesting to see where they finish. I think the way the playoffs land will be really interesting to like the semi-finals and how that may play out, and ultimately decide who Bath inevitably play in the final. If it does turn out to be Sale, they've got to get over ahead of Leicester in the table, I believe. But on Bristol, I think the main point with Bristol is for 70 minutes they were carrying on the Bristol that we saw at the Principality. Actually quite pragmatic, quite, almost unimaginative. They didn't look like Bristol we'd seen for the rest of the season. And then for the final 10 minutes, they thought, screw it, let's go back to how we played before. And they looked exciting again.
I think this is their problem at the moment. They don't really know what to do, because obviously they got so loose for a few weeks that it was just killing them in games. So then they've flipped right round to being, almost the opposite to that with this pragmatic style, which doesn't really suit them as a team.
No.
And then as soon as the game was gone, they suddenly switched it on and looked like they did at the start of the season, where they looked brilliant.
Yeah, it's almost, and I don't want to say this, but it was the second they took off AJ McGinty and brought on Harry Byrne. It's like they just reverted back to how they were playing before. And AJ McGinty was pivotal for that working prior to his injury. So I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it was just the fact that the game had already gone and they could just play with a bit more freedom. But it's interesting to see how Bristol fare, because they're still in with a shot of the playoffs.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're still right in the mix for it. I mean, what frustrates me really about, they nearly scored that wonder try just after they got the bonus point try, and then they put Will Capon runs that really great line off. I think it's they go over to Bill Matter on the other side. He nearly scores in the corner, and there's a really good tackle by Sam Bedlow to knock the ball out. It's almost a phenomenal try.
Yeah,
and you watch that and you go, well, if you'd played like that for 80 minutes, you definitely have won this game.
Yeah, that's the thing.
The Ravuvu scores straight after. They've got players like Ravuvu who are magnificent, but they just, I don't know. They don't know if it's a mentality thing, or I don't really know what it is with them. They just don't seem to have been able to cope with the pressure of being challengers in the second half of the season.
I feel like they're not making the right decisions to play. They haven't made the right identification to play in that loose way at the right times. And they've reverted back to this pragmatic style that's not necessarily worked for them, I'd say. Because I bear in mind, 3-4 weeks ago, we were saying that we were being critical of them about not being able to go to this pragmatic style and being too loose far too often. I think right now they need to figure out the balance, and it doesn't need to be one or the other. I think they need to figure out where that middle ground is, where they keep that pragmatism, so they're making the right choices when in the right parts of the pitch, rather than constantly trying to run out from their own posts. But they need to be able to switch to this really exciting loose style when the chances are on. Because I think that's where they're missing out at the moment. I think that's where it's feeling a bit disconnected.
Yeah, I think you've identified it there. They just haven't really matured as a team. In the way that, if you think back to, say, 3 or 4 seasons ago, Saints, when the Saints were really starting to get into this attacking style of play they play now, and there was a season or two where they could not get the balance right. They never looked right. And then when they won the league last year, they just made good decisions on when to go and when not to go at all times.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just having the right people at halfback. I mean, I don't know if I'm being harsh, but is Harry Randall maybe not the halfback to marshal a team in that way?
Well, yeah, he's less of a distributor. He's more of a fringe threat, isn't he? And I think that you need someone with a bit more, maybe tactical nous, maybe sees a bit more of a game, where Randall's great for a snipe around the fringes when the props aren't keep paying attention. and he's rapid and runs great support lines. But I think for the way Bristol play, maybe they just need a bit more of a distributor, a bit more of a playmaker in that 9 shirt, maybe. And again, like Kieran Marmion, who kind of always comes on for Harry Randall, he's actually, if you look at his stats, like per minute, he's having a hell of a season, just constantly off the bench for Bristol. And he is a bit more of a playmaker, so maybe that is what they need. Not that I want to begrudge Harry Randall at all, because he's a fine player, but maybe that style just doesn't quite work in the way they're trying to play.
It just feels like their decision making of when to go and when not to go is off, and that does tend to fall on scrum half or your fly half.
Yeah,
and there just seems to be a disconnect there. I just don't, when it clicks, they look so good, but they've just had so many weeks this season when it's just looked.
I do feel that they look like they're trying to force things now, because I'm guessing they're getting frustrated themselves that it's not clicking. And the problem is, once you start forcing things, that's when you have a lot of these errors. And I think there's a few players that are just they try something that's just really not on, or just do it with slightly poor execution. And it is a struggle. So as I said, I wasn't trying to go into a deep dive. We nearly gone into a deep dive there, Rory. Almost fell into the trap. But Sale Sharks 41, Bristol Bears 27. So that scoreline, if it wasn't for the last 10 minutes, Bristol were not anywhere near Sale, really, in this game, really. It was very comfortable for them. And Sale very much looking like, as you say, the more dominant force out of the two. Now, your beloved Gloucester were also playing Friday night. Interesting game.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the problem, I think, if I'm being completely honest, it looks like we've lost our form at exactly the wrong time this season. We got a bonus point winning this match, so let's not catastrophize things. Obviously, it was so poor last week against Quins, and in this game, what I saw was a team that's maybe lost a bit of confidence in what it's trying to do, and we're getting quite a lot of persistent problems coming up. We keep getting turned over in the wide channels. Maybe other teams have slightly figured out how to counter what Gloucester have done this season. Because Gloucester's ability to go wide this season has been fantastic. They've got a lot of really good tries from doing it. But the last few weeks, it just feels like they're getting a bit figured out, and I'm not sure if at the moment they've got the answers to counteract that. They don't seem that they don't seem to be able to switch into a different style when they need to, because Newcastle gave them some trouble in this game, really. It could have been a lot closer than it was, and
definitely could have been.
Yeah, so my worry is that we're sort of limping towards the end of the season when actually there's still a really good opportunity to make the playoffs. We got Northampton in the last game of the season when, they'll either be on a hangover
or hungover.
Yeah. So there's still a really good opportunity to win that game, and every chance that someone slips up above them and they can get into the playoffs. But I don't know, something at the moment just feels like maybe the confidence is a bit short to take advantage of it. And it's a shame, because it's been a really good season up to now. If you look, we're from this point last season, we've got 21 more points this year than we did last year. It's a huge improvement.
It's huge. Yeah, that's some upturn.
Yeah, massive. But what you don't want to do is the momentum to drop now before you've got this potentially really exciting summer with the players coming in, and the potential team that we've got next season, despite, some of the players that are leaving, obviously, are some really good players leaving. The signings we've made are really exciting, and you kind of want to be able to carry momentum into that.
Yeah, you don't want the season to end with a whimper.
Yeah, it feels like we're stuttering at the moment. And, what I don't want is next season us to kind of revert to type.
Yeah.
There's some good moments. There's some good moments of the game. Seb Atkinson had another really good game.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he got 2 assists and a try in this one. Put Cockgreave in, put Chris Harris in, scored a nice try himself.
Yeah.
Cockgreave scored a try on his first Premiership start. I think it's his second Premiership try in as many games. So
yeah, that'll be good for his confidence.
It looks like they were excited about him as a player coming up. So it looks like he might actually fulfil that promise, which is really good. I said, worries for me that that kind of mental fragility that Gloucester have had in the past is sort of resurfacing.
Yeah, it does feel that way. I did feel that there seems to be a bit of doggedness coming back to Newcastle. So I've so Tom Gordon's come back from a long injury, and before he got injured, he was like top of the tackle charts by a long way. So he's one hell of a player to have in your pack. I think Callum Chick rose to the occasion as well, of it being his last game at Kingston Park. He had a great game.
Yeah.
So Newcastle, it was not a bad performance by any shape or means. They were, bar a few mad decisions and some discipline issues, I think this could have been a really close game otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, they fell on the wrong side of the referee again, didn't they?
Yeah.
You talk about the red card at the end, which was just a daft challenge. It's just a bad decision by Stevenson, who'd had a really good game up to that point, scored a really good try, put Joe Davis in for his try, and then just goes and does something like that. And you just think, like, if you're Steve Diamond, if you had any hair left, you'd be pulling it out because they do all these good things, and then it was like the high shot they had the other week against Bath.
Yeah,
and you're watching it going, like, why are you like putting yourself in this position where you're just putting the team under more pressure? But you say Gordon, Neild, Chick, Lockwood on the bench.
Yeah,
you've got some really nuggety, tough players there that you can build an ethos around. The stories of Red Bull coming in are hotting up. That seems to be potentially more than rumour now.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether that's bringing a little lease of life to Kingston Park that may have been missing in recent months, because that must be exciting, hearing those rumours.
It's got to be.
It's got to
be exciting.
And there does seem to be a lot to these rumours. It's more than just hearsay, I feel.
Look, we both hope that it turns out to be true, because it'd be a great story for not just for Newcastle, but for the league.
Yeah.
And fingers crossed, in the next few weeks we'll get confirmation of that. And I hope they keep Steve Diamond on and they let him
build something.
Use whatever. Yeah, build a proper dynasty up there. But
it is interesting seeing some of the other social media sites already predicting the players that they'll be bringing in with the Red Bull money. Obviously, because Jack Nowell wears a Red Bull scrum cap, he's going to leave the French Riviera and come to Kingston Park.
Yeah, I mean, I think he seems pretty happy in La Rochelle.
Yeah.
It's a fun game to play. If you had unlimited money, who would you sign for Newcastle? But I think they will definitely sign some...
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Some really interesting players. I think what you'll probably find is that this all kind of comes out maybe too late to have a massive impact in terms of personnel for next season.
It's already too late for next season, I'd say, because all the players that will be currently... all the top players running out of contracts will already have deals.
What it probably does mean that they can do, though, is actually bulk out, with the kind of the players that have been released and haven't been picked up anywhere else yet.
Yeah,
they can actually, they could utilise their whole salary cap, for example, which at the moment they can't do.
Well, and they could spend 12 months actually planning to build a squad and not worry about having to cut costs at every juncture. Which I imagine is how they're having to operate at the moment. So it'll be an interesting one to watch, that one, the Red Bull story. It's definitely one to keep a close eye on. But this game itself ended 26-12 to Gloucester. Bonus point victory for Gloucester keeps them very much still with a playoff shout. Largely thanks to the next result, Northampton Saints versus Saracens. And I was at the game.
Okay, how was it?
It was incredible. For 60 minutes, Saracens were the better team, I'd say.
Yeah.
Their back row were absolute nemesises to Northampton. They were far. They won the physical confrontation. They won the breakdown battle. The scrum, they were on top of us. Line out wise, they were on top of us. We really were struggling to get through their defence. Like, Saracens looked like they were on for a sure thing. And then at the 60-minute mark, Northampton kind of did as it's expected. They took off Finn Smith, Alex Mitchell was off, they took off all their Lions, they took off rested players that were going to be needed for next weekend. And it feels like Saracens also left the field at this point because they just absolutely lost all momentum, all focus, and allowed Northampton back in. A couple of really soft tries at times. And the fact that Northampton were then within a score going into the final minute, it felt inevitable. And what I'll say, for what was, from a Northampton Saints perspective, a real dead rubber of a game in the Premiership, The atmosphere was electric. It was one of the loudest days I'd seen at Franklin's Gardens since. It's definitely not as loud, but the semi-final against Leicester, where Wood scores in the corner to get to the final, where we go on and win the league. Like, it was so loud. It was, and this the tension at the end where they were checking that forward pass, which obviously was not a forward pass.
Okay, well, I'm glad you've made your decision on that, because I was worried there were 2 forward passes for that final try, but
obviously flat. Both of them were extremely flat passes. Hey, if the ref didn't give it, it's not a forward pass.
No, absolutely no. Quite right. Watching this game back, I thought Saints scrapped really well to stay in it, but at half time they were clinging on. Saracens were really all over them, and the Saracens back row. I mean, they are 3 of the most remarkable athletes in the league in Gonzalez, Willis, and Curran. Earl, sorry. No, they were absolutely destroying your breakdown.
They were.
I mean, they were just causing carnage. I thought the Saints scrum
looked weak,
really struggling. It looked in.
I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why that is, because, as you say, literally against Leinster, we held up against one of the best scrums in Europe, and for some reason it just fell apart.
Not sure what it was, but they were untidy, to say the least. But they stayed in the game, and then Alex Coles nearly scores early on in the second half, and there's a really good tackle from Tom Willis to knock it out of his hands, and it's a remarkable tackle. But I think, okay, maybe they've got something in this. But then Tariq Kafar scores off that sort of power play about an hour in. And it just all switched up. It just suddenly it's all Saints. Up to that point, they hadn't really had any balls since Finn Smith put Kemeny in at the start with that grubber. You got that 50 odd minutes where they really had no possession or territory.
No, just defending.
And suddenly and then you got the penalty try. Onyema Christie ends up getting carded, and you just think, well, they're going to do it now, and they do. And Tariq Kafar with a lovely finish off a extremely flat pass to win the game. Very flat pass.
All I can say, Tom Litchfield, some excellent offloading, some excellent passing, and keep it up. A number of people have spoken to me after this game saying, why are you letting Jake Garside go? And based on that 20 minutes, based on that 20 minutes, I think that's a fair question. Because
do you know where he's going?
I don't. I joked before the game that he's obviously off to Bedford Blues, because that tends to be where a lot of the ex-Saints Academies players end up when they get released. But he was a real point of difference. He's definitely. I don't. He might be one that has got away. And sadly, so it was him and Tariq Kafar were the 2 real difference makers, I think. And Tariq Kafar's also leaving. So hopefully,
interesting turnover of players at Saints. Be interesting to see how they fare up next season. I guess it's slightly more dour news, but looking ahead to next weekend, what's the injury report looking like? Because it looked like Curtis James Ram.
I'm thinking this is karma for our controversial post about Bath not picking their strongest players against Bristol at the Principality, and then saying, it's because they're protecting their players so they don't get injured. I feel this was karma, because every player we really don't want to get injured got an injury, because it was in every position we're really struggling as it is. Curtis Langdon in the hooker position. We're already on our 4th choice hooker with Craig Wright. James Ram, I don't think we've got any other back 3 players available. So again, another one you don't want to be hurt. Henry Pollock was down getting treatment at every breakdown. Timo Mayana-Vanua didn't look great when he went off. Saracens just absolutely battered us, and I really, really hope that none of the injuries are too long. I've not seen anything announced. Seeing the way James Ram was walking after the game, I'm not wholly confident that he'll be around, be able to play. Curtis Langdon, I'm hoping, was just like a bad stinger, and he'll be fine for the final.
Yeah, that looked like an ACJ stinger, which are horrible, and they're some of those painful things you can have at the moment, but they do tend to go down after a few days. If Ram's out, that does cause a real problem.
It does, because I think we'll be resorting to a back line of Freeman, Seabrook, and Litchfield, which isn't the back 3 you want to be going up against Louis Bielbiore, Roman Buros, and whoever else they choose to replace Penno, one of the many very talented teenagers they seem to have in their team.
Yeah.
So yeah, not ideal in that sense. Proof will be in the pudding this weekend.
Yeah, look, I hope it's not too bad and we get some good news out of it, because it'd be a real shame for Saints to not have a team strong enough to compete.
It'll be a real shame. But if Saints pull it off, will it be the greatest Champions Cup win in history?
Well, I'd hate to ask a Saints fan to grow a second eye, so why not?
Consider the context, consider the run, consider the opposition, consider the greater rugby context of the difference between the leagues. Would there be a more David versus Goliath Champions Cup win in the history of the Champions Cup?
I mean, Exeter might have something to say about that.
Not nowhere near as impressive. Look, Exeter did a double that year. Like Northampton are 7th in the table.
Sure. As I say, I wouldn't dream of asking a Saints fan to have a second eye about these kind of things. So, for the sake of your perspective, then yes, of course, it would be the greatest Champions Cup win of all time.
Thank you. And in your perspective,
I think there's been some very fine champions in the past.
Get off the fence.
I think it would. I don't know that it would be the greatest of all time. Possibly the most surprising. Yes.
I will take most surprising. We'll just have to see if Gus predicts a Northampton win this weekend. He did pretty well. He did 4 out of 5. Gus the dog, for the listener, if anyone's aware, I got my dog to do a prediction for this round's Premiership fixtures, and he got 4 out of 5 right. So
yeah.
And we're not running out of content.
No. It's possible that David has a dog with the power of foresight, or it's possible that David's reasonably good at editing videos in a way that
I can hand on heart say each pick was done as one take of each one.
Sure.
I promise, sir. I'm not guilty. But but we've got to slightly sidetracked. So that game ended 28-24 to Northampton, and really opened up an interesting narrative to the final round, because Saracens were running away, looking like they were going to be getting a really strong footing for that 4th spot in the playoffs. They're now 6th behind Gloucester based on, I think, countback, and are real outside shots of qualifying now. And I think Northampton would have made it even more special for the fans, knowing that they were potentially stopping Saracens qualifying for the playoffs, because there is a little bit of a rivalry there. Moving on, Bath versus Leicester. Safe to say that Bath resting their players didn't have an impact to their performance?
No. I should slightly address this. I mean, I think what my point was slightly taken out of context by some people on that.
It's almost like I edited it deliberately that way.
Yes, you might have. You have a very good knack of editing these clips to make me look like the villain, which is very funny, but does lead to me getting pelters from around the world. The reason I think that Bath should have played their best team last week is because it's a showpiece event, and I think that's a sort of occasion that needs marquee players. Whereas this week was, basically their warm up to the final. They could have chosen to play a full team or a mixed team. They've got a big enough squad to cope with either decision. They just looked very good in this one. Let's be realistic about it. They looked a cut above Tigers. It's we've opined about how good Bath have been this season a lot, and neither of us enjoy it really. I think Tigers. I'm still really struggling to come to terms with how Tigers are second this season, because I don't think they're the second best team in the league.
Yeah, it's been a real weird one to see them up near the top. Because I don't think I've watched them and thought, "Wow, this is a really good team." That often, there's been moments, there's been flashes, but I don't really know how they've ended up second, unless all the other teams have just slipped up at the wrong time.
They just seem to be plodding on, and they just seem to keep getting wins, even though they don't really play that well.
I think this result notwithstanding, I think they've just been really good at sticking in with games and then being really effective in the final 20 minutes. I think that's where they've been good. They've played full 80 minutes.
They have a team built to try and physically overpower the opposition, but they came up against a Bath team this week that can not only cope with that, they're the most powerful team in the league. Yeah. The Tigers' attacking shape, I still think, is really quite average. And that kind of one-out forward runner against a team like Bath is just not going to get you anywhere.
No.
And it really...
And it didn't.
It really backfired this week. There was a point in the first half they had a lot of ball. They were, say, to an extent putting pressure on Bath. They were sort of territory, but they're just getting nowhere near breaking Bath down. Until Stewart threw a questionable pass to Radwan. It's a lovely left to right pass. If you're being ultra critical, you'd say it went 2 meters forward.
It's really flat again.
Another really flat pass. But outside of that, Van Poorfleet with a lovely crossfield kick to Joe Woodward.
Yeah.
Was a tall player and he manages to finish that off. That was a very nice bit of play. But Pollard didn't have a great game, but some really poor tactical kicks at weird times. Just almost didn't look that interested in some ways.
Yeah, which is weird. Like last week I was bigging up Pollard, saying that I feel like he's looked a lot better the last few weeks than I'd seen for most of his time in the Leicester shirt. Yesterday was a bit of a flash to what we've seen from most of his rest of the time in the Leicester shirt. It almost feels like when he knows Leicester are the second best team that he kind of just doesn't care as much, which is a really harsh thing to say for a professional rugby player. Obviously he cares, but just it doesn't seem to give that extra 10%.
No, he doesn't give that energy that he brings into like South African performances.
Yeah.
To Leicester. He just hasn't brought that, I don't think.
Yeah, and maybe he knew that game was always going to be too much for them. He knew that. Well, he's off back to South Africa. His head might be a little bit planning his next move. I don't know, but they have got a semi-final coming, I think. So
yeah, do you know what? I think he'll be amazing for the Bulls. I bet. I almost guarantee he'll be brilliant for the Bulls.
Yeah, great news for the URC.
But it just doesn't seem to really have taken to the Premiership, I don't think.
No, and I don't think the Leicester Tigers fans have taken that much to him either. The ones I speak to, they're not that fussed that he's leaving, and considering he's a 2-time World Cup winning fly half,
it just hasn't had the impact.
Miss those sort of players.
You would think so, but it just hasn't had that impact, I don't think, which is a shame because he's one of the few superstars in the league in many ways, but it just hasn't really come off for him. Someone it has come off for was Tom Dunn.
Yeah.
Another really good game. The finish for his try, the little dummy and go.
And just going back to our early conversation, should he be in England squad?
Yeah, arguably we should have picked him. he's just been out of the squad for a while. You don't really think of him as being in contention anymore.
And don't really think about them in the international picture, even though they fully deserve it. And Tom Dunn fully deserves it. If he wasn't growing up in an era of Jamie George and Luke Cowan-Dickie, he would have a lot more caps than he does.
He'd have a hat full of caps, yeah. Just sometimes you just get unlucky like that, don't you? And maybe the next iteration of sort of international hook is going to be a bit more on the Theo Dan, Gabriel Ogre kind of scale of things than they are on the Tom Dunn scale of things. So maybe it's just an unfortunate bit of timing for him.
Yeah, perhaps. But this game, not a great deal to write home about in this game. It was always felt inevitable, even though this is the one that the dog got wrong. Ended 43-15 to Bath. A pretty comfortable win for the team in first place against the team in second place, which kind of tells you about how much better they are than everyone else. And then this next game, interesting one, Harlequins versus Exeter at the Stoop.
Yeah. Danny Care's farewell.
Danny Care's farewell to the Stoop. And it looked like they did a real good job of the send-off. Obviously, he got the special agreement for Premiership Rugby to allow him to start from the bench in the 9 shirt. So Will Porter started in the 21 shirt. I thought it was a nice touch. Obviously, his family was there, the big signs up in the crowd. It seemed like a really nice send-off for him. And at least the game finished with kind of, he had the final kick of the game, which felt quite fitting, albeit.
Did you not think it was quite strange that they didn't go for the 4th try?
I think they just wanted to get the game over and done with, because I feel like Exeter were in the ascendancy at that stage in the game. Exeter did not look like Exeter of old, I'd say, at times. And at other times they did. But certainly they grew into the game, I think. And there's a few players that, had they not had poorer seasons, some of them could have plagued themselves into an England shirt this summer. Yeah.
I mean, Quinn's got out a couple of scores, and then she scored the next 3, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, Quinn. They started quite well. Like Murley was looking really busy.
Yeah, he looks back on form, I think.
He does. Murley. He does. But I think Exeter, they just out-breakdowned the breakdown specialists. Ethan Roots was an absolute nemesis. he was just making life so difficult for the Quins background. And I think this is probably the first game in ages that neither Will Evans or Jack Kenningham got a turnover. Just Exeter just outdid them in that department.
Which is mad when you think the week before they basically just dismantled Gloucester's entire attacking football.
How weird is rugby? Like, one week Gloucester beats Exeter by 79 points. The week later, Harlequins thrash Gloucester, and then the week after that, it's a real close game between Harlequins and Exeter. Like, figure it out. It makes no sense in the form book. But
it's a parochial sport, isn't it?
That's why the game's not played on paper.
No, but I think, Chiefs, to be fair, they look like a team that have had a coach get in amongst them. So
there was a bit of bite.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Rob Baxter's said some pretty pointed things since last week in particular, but it looks like they've had a bit of a rocket and they're responding to it.
Yeah,
we'll see if it continues, but I think whether Chiefs can kick on into next season from there is entirely different question. I still think there's a lot of question marks about what that squad looks like next season.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think with Baxter back in as head coach and Dave Warder coming in, they got a chance of making some improvements. But I've still got some question marks about that team. Really,
I expect them to be more competitive next year as well. It's an interesting. They've made some interesting signings, and obviously the likes of Feo Roboso coming back would be interesting as well because he obviously offers a very different threat that no other team really has. So it'll be interesting. But so a couple of so Ruz Tuima looked like a real pest, and he had a bit of gas on him as well, considering the size of the guy. Like for the little breakaway he had, there's a bit of acceleration there that I didn't know he possessed. As I said, like Ethan Roots, I thought had they not actually had a relatively poor season, like people might have started talking about him off that performance as being, is he worth another look at in an England shirt? So there's a couple of guys that I think looked pretty good, and obviously Paul Brambampa in the air. Unreal, like his ability to get up on those kick chases. I think he's definitely up there with Tom Roebuck at being the best in the league at that. So they've definitely got some stuff to build around. But that game itself, as we said, it was a close one. It was a victory for Harlequins, a nice fitting send-off for Danny Kerr, but it ended 24-22. Bit of a dead rubber, really. There's nothing in it for either of these two teams. Just a bit of a send-off for Danny Kerr, and Exeter, as you say, had a rocket up him from Rob Baxter trying out some new things. He seemed a bit happier in the comms with the commentators. So obviously he's probably pleased with some of the developments he's seen this week. But yeah, as we know with Exeter, their season is run, really. This is just a case of seeing it out and planning for next year. And with that is the Premiership. Round 17, rounded up for you, listener. I hope you enjoyed that. One round to go in the Premiership. All games being played at the same time. It really is going to be interesting to see how the playoff picture ends and lands. But obviously, this weekend coming up, there's a couple of games that we'll talk about next week, I think. All eyes turn to Cardiff and Champions Cup, Challenge Cup, and we'll be talking about that in detail next week. Now, Rory, whilst you were gallivanting around the Jurassic Coast, has any correspondence reached the DPRFR at all?
Well, yes, whilst I was climbing one of several ludicrous ascents on the south coast, one thing occurred to me that the DPRFR is in desperate need of a rapid response mountaineering rescue service for stranded front rowers. And arguably one of the things that the DPRFR is not necessarily blessed with is speed and manoeuvrability most of the time. But a couple of players this weekend did show a proper bit of toe.
Oh, good. Lovely. So it's nice to know that those traits haven't been forgotten.
Absolutely. So heading up our rapid response team from this moment forward will be Tara Kafar and Tom Dunn.
Fantastic.
And the next time I'm halfway up a mountain with a real need to be rescued, I expect to see them both sprinting up there with a stretcher and a beer for me.
Well, to be fair, I couldn't think of two better people because, yeah, as you say, very dynamic. Bit of toe on them. I think if I was to be saved from a hillside by two front rowers, two very, very solid picks. And similar height as well, so you know where you're on the stretcher, you're not going to be...
Not sliding off,
which is very important, because there's nothing worse than a prop falling off of a stretcher, because...
I demand to be rescued in comfort.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully, Hafar done. Sounds like a law firm, really. Hafar and done. Hopefully, they accept this job opportunity as the emergency response unit to the DPRFR, and we look forward to hearing to your response. Thank you very much, Rory, for continuing this metaphor. It's not stretched enough. We'll keep going. But that does mean it is the end of the podcast, Rory. And I'm going to give you time. I'm going to give you time to start thinking about your final words.
Roll on, Cardiff.
Nice and simple, Rory. Roll on, Cardiff. We've been Ruxballs and Overballs. I've been Dave. He's been Rory. And we'll be back next week to talk all things Europe. But for now, have a great week and a great weekend.
See ya.